Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to the last in our series of presentations for the winter season. And we're talking about lived experience in the workplace, aka peer support. And what a better time to talk about that than when it's sunny and the world feels like a big place. And we have two folks with us who also make the world feel like a big place, John Drips and Karen Nelson. I'm gonna ask them to introduce themselves in a second. But first, I just want to share a little bit about what we're doing here. So like I said, this has been a webinar series. It's been going on since October, November, and we want to share different pieces of the behavioral health world to give folks a bigger understanding than what they might have. I think we as an organization have a lot of people contact us who are new to thinking about their own mental health or new to supporting a loved one's mental health. And they might be on board with the idea of treatment, but don't know all the considerations of what treatment is and all the different forms that it can take. And peer support is one of those forms that is very near and dear to my heart. And I think the easiest way to define peer support is someone using their own lived experience, addressing their own mental health or their own substance use issues to support somebody else. And so in that context, peer support can happen when it's two people talking on the sidewalk. So I could be chatting with John and he'd be saying, man, I'm having such a tough time lately. And I can say, oh, I can totally relate. I've had a tough time before too. That's one example of peer support. That's something we all do various versions of when we're walking around in the world on a day-to-day basis. There's also some long-standing organized peer support that exists. Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous are two examples where people come together and everyone is relating as an equal. You know, like maybe there's someone who sends out a reminder email or calls the meeting to order, but like no one is there as the expert and no one's there as the student of the expert. Like the idea is that everyone at an AA meeting is learning from one another, even playing field. We at NAMI Juneau also have a peer support group where we show up and talk about our own mental health. And it's the same thing. Like there is someone responsible for keeping the meeting going, but there's no expectation of anybody being the expert any more than anyone else. Like everyone's there on the same in the same plane, same realm of existence, supporting one another, sharing their experience in the hopes that that's meaningful to somebody else. Clinton and Haida has peer support groups. There are online peer support groups, all kinds that will apply to a lot of different topics. We can speak about those later. And then there's also something that's maybe capital letter peer support specialist. And that's a specific state designation, a credential, just like a nurse is credentialed or a doctor is credentialed or a therapist is credentialed. And peer support specialists, capitalized all of them, is a role that's growing in prominence in Alaska and the United States and the world. And it's a role that you might see at JAMI or Bartlett Hospital or Search Behavioral Health, where somebody's using their lived experience to support the well-being of a person who's coming to that place for services, the same way that a prescriber might be a part of the treatment team. So if I'm showing up to JAMI and I'm saying, I've got depression, I've got anxiety, I want some help, maybe I go get some meds, or at least I have the option to go get meds from a prescriber. And I have the option to go see a therapist and do some talk therapy. I would also have the option to go see a peer support specialist. And that peer support specialist in that professional role can be a bunch of different things. It looks different at different organizations. But the one common component is that person is relating to me as an equal and saying, I've been there, I get it, I've done something similar, I've approaching my recovery in this way. Maybe that's going to work for you, maybe not, but let's talk it through. And I think that human connection is awesome and something that I was really uncomfortable with in my own experience getting mental health care. It felt weird to go into a medical seeming setting and have to spill my guts to somebody who was the expert while I was this panicky 15-year-old, then a panicky 20-year-old, then a panicky 25-year-old. During all those ages, it was weird and uncomfortable, and I never felt settled. Once I found peer support, I think it was very eye-opening. It was very reassuring to realize that was something that I could engage with that could be a part of my recovery. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We'd love for you all to chime in with questions as we go. We have a small enough group that it's very easy to have this be more conversational. So please either type in questions if that's what's comfortable for you, or just unmute yourselves and speak up as we go. And with that, I'd like to ask John, could you introduce yourself, and then Kara after John, introduce yourself and just say whatever you think is relevant about yourself to the lovely folks here today.
Hi, I'm John. Thanks for the introduction. And it's really nice to see all of your faces. And those of you who aren't showing your faces, it's nice to know that you're listening. Yeah, I got interested in peer support after having my own experience, like Aaron was talking about. You know, you see a doctor and it's kind of like, hey, I need help. And then you see a therapist and I think that it's more comfortable talking to a therapist. It's more socially expected to talk to a therapist rather than, like Aaron was talking about, spilling your guts to a doctor. I think peer support is something that, in my experience of mental health, was kind of like an afterthought, or like an adjunct. And I recently completed the peer support specialist training with NAMI Juneau, and I've learned about how different organizations have utilized peer support as more of a central focus of like person-centered and patient-centered care, which I think is really exciting and something that I'm interested in being a part of. Yeah, I started going to some of the NAMI peer support groups, as well as there's a, well, I've done some other things. I guess I don't need to talk about everything, but my name is John, and I started facilitating the peer support groups with NAMI Juneau and NAMI statewide. And yeah, I'm happy to be here to learn from all of you.
Thanks, John. Kara, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, John, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Kara Nelson, and I am a person in recovery from both mental health as well as substance use disorder. I spent 20 years in active addiction in and out of prisons, and we'll be celebrating 12 years substance free here on June 1st, which is crazy. So I just have, since I got out, it's been just a whirlwind of, like you were talking about, Aaron, you know, it is just one person walking alongside another. And I mean, I did that in my youth. I did that while I was in prison. I did that when I got out. And then it just became something that I found other people across the country that were utilizing peer support and calling it recovery coaching or peer support professionals. And I just, it like lit a fire in me, and I just found out everything I could about it and really wanted to build a foundation, a structure around it. And of course, back then I didn't even know what structure was or how to build anything, but you know, we just did it, me and some friends, some incredibly powerful ladies, just were kind of an underground system of people who ended up being the folks that people would call. We weren't even working for an organization. It was just like the ER would call us, the WARE would call us, you know, the rainforest would call us, the police would call us, law enforcement. And so really that's how I started. And I was just very fortunate to be super naive back then and just jump into things I was never invited to, didn't know anything about. Like I don't live in Juneau now, but I lived there for 10 years, lived in the state capitol, and just learning about that. I was able to meet with a group of community members who wanted to start a home for women called Haven House Juneau. And I was really honored to be the one to bring that to fruition very shortly after my last release, which was June 1st, 2011. And again, it was just helping my people, you know, my sisters and brothers. And I didn't know, I mean, none of us knew what we were doing at the time. We were just helping our friends and finding the best ways to make change. So since then, I mean, I just have been super passionate about removing barriers and really breaking stigma when it comes to especially folks that are incarcerated and addiction and mental health. And I've worked for Haven House. I was the executive director there for a long time, and I left and went to ministry school for 3 years and then came back to Alaska and now work at True North Recovery. I'm the chief operating officer at True North Recovery in Wasilla. We also have facilities in Fairbanks. We do inpatient treatment, outpatient. We have crisis services. We have a mobile crisis team. We do reentry services. We just opened a detox center. Super exciting. We have 8 beds in the valley. It's phenomenal. So when you think of detox too, sorry, I might go off on some tangents. Sorry. It's a beautiful home. When you walk in, you would never, I just walk in all the time. Like, I can't believe this is where people get to come in and get well. We have walk-in crisis services. So even people who aren't even thinking about getting clean or thinking about treatment or anything like that. We have peers on site, case managers on site, same-day access for assessments, walk-in assessments 5 days a week. And just the whole recovery continuum of care, but also that pre-contemplation, I like to call it the pre-recovery phase, which is like, I don't want anything to do with that, but we're still going to love on you, give you a shower, give you a snack, and hopefully at least get you into a detox bed, and then, however many times it takes.
Welcome.
So
thanks to you all for being here. My name is Aaron, and I'm the director of NAMI Juneau.
Gary, you can go ahead. I think that was
weird.
recording was playing back or something.
I love that. So yeah, that's just where I'm literally doing what I was born to do, and that is just to pull as many of my brothers and sisters up as I can, just like so many others have done for me. I love to go into the prisons. It's my favorite place to be. And just really innovative. So True North Recovery has about 100 employees, and I would say about 85% of us all have lived experience or folks that have, a loved one. So it's very personal. And so we get to take our professional expertise and couple that with our lived experience. And so we come up with very innovative ideas. And I think that's something that is incredibly impactful, because not only do we have the expertise and the education and the master clinicians and all the things we need to fit into, the system that we have to be able to give treatment in the state of Alaska, but also we have that lens of that lived experience. So we just come up with cool stuff and we run with it, and everyone from the CEO, I'm the COO, all the way through, our janitors, our intake people. I mean, we're all very invested. It's very personal. It's very intense all the time because we're very intense people. But yeah, I'm so great. It's so great to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Kara, and thanks, John, for introducing yourselves. I think the first thing I wanted to speak to is the magic of peer support. I really want to sell you all on this concept the same way that I'm sold on it. And Kara, I think you're leading us right into it. So if you could answer first, but just like, what is the fact that there's so many people at True North Recovery with lived experience? What does that change about the environment? Why is that special? What do you see happening because management and staff are people with lived experience in recovery?
I mean, I think it changes everything. We have folks that aren't in recovery too, and that's super beneficial. And obviously education is important. We just see things differently. I was in prison in and out 20 years. I can say that so casually when I'm talking to you, but what that actually meant and the experiences that I went through, I'm going to know things that someone else, you just can't learn that. And so when I have a client coming in, and nobody sees me and thinks, oh yeah, she did, years and years of prison, multiple felonies, active addiction. And they're just shocked, but instantly there's a trust there. And honestly, like, it's important for us at True North Recovery, and everything I do is to like, we need a seat at every table, right? In leadership roles, yes, we have professional peer roles, and those are important. We have tons of them in our organization. We've been doing it for a lot of years. But also it's important to have people with lived experience in executive leadership roles, because there is just a different lens. Couple that with, I mean, I've worked with lots of different organizations who don't have people lived experience, but they value that in such a way that we get to work as a team and move forward. That is so much more impactful. I mean, just like opening withdrawal management, how long has the state been talking? Every community talks about, we need detox, Juneau. I sat through all the meetings where we got the detox beds at Bartlett, Ketchikan, all over the place. We make it so complicated. It's not, and so because of just who we are and the way we think, it's like, how can we take the regs and what we know is our state requirements and actually make that in a way that we know is impactful. Like, it's not just on words or paper, like people are actually their lives are being saved every day. So I don't know if that answered your question, because again, I get very like hyped up and can go in a lot of directions.
The hype is very fun and very appreciated, so thank you. And yeah, I think it absolutely does, like just understanding what somebody needs makes it a lot easier to provide that. I think that's, if like there's, you said a lot, but like that's how I would simplify what you said, and
Sure.
And that makes a lot of sense. John, how about you? Where do you see the magic in the concept of peer support?
I think there's just think for yourself for a second about a time when you encountered an uneven power dynamic, whether that was at work. I mean, schools are full of uneven power dynamics, but think for a second, like back to that time. Put yourself in that mindset and think like, is that a set of emotions that's going to support recovery for somebody? When I have experienced uneven power dynamics, and like I experienced that with accessing medical care or accessing mental health care, when you have that, it feels uncomfortable. It feels icky sometimes, and for me, it didn't support recovery. The way I experienced that accessing mental health care was having someone sitting opposite me who clearly didn't understand what I was going through, who would use cliches or trite observations to try to like get me to pull myself up by my bootstraps somehow. Whereas, when I did this peer support specialist training last week, there was no pretense. Everybody there was coming from a position of vulnerability, and everybody there was coming from I've been there mindset. And I think that, when I'm doing peer support groups with NAMI, people come there because they're craving the genuineness that comes from sharing a space with other people with lived experience. And as Kara was saying, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. As Kara was saying, I think it's a great step in her organization where they're not just having peer support specialists as an adjunct, but they're transforming the organization around the idea of peer support. I think for a long time, a lot of people have become social workers, have gotten into providing mental health care because they have had their own experiences, they do have those lived experiences. And for a long time, those lived experiences were stigmatized, and people who worked in mental health were forced to hide those experiences. And it's really exciting that the peer support specialist program and the growing surge of interest in peer support is making it so that people can bring their lived experiences as an asset in helping create a more genuine environment that's more conducive to recovery. So that's what I see as the magic of peer support.
Thank you, John. I think the place that I see the magic the most is we get a lot of phone calls from people that are asking questions about getting mental health services, asking about how to get a therapist or how does intake at Bartlett outpatient work. We also get a lot of phone calls from parents who are worried about a loved one, who are worried about someone and want to get some kind of information to be supportive. Like that's normally how the request is phrased. I personally want to get some information or to help myself, or I want to help my spouse or children or whoever it is. I want to help somebody out in my life. I always hear the question phrased in that way. And when I have like a substantial conversation with somebody, more often than not, the gratitude they express is gratitude for hearing that they aren't alone in the concern that they're feeling. So like people do say like, thank you, you gave me the right form to fill out to go to JAMI to get psychiatric services, or thank you for telling me the website of JuneauMentalHealth.org so I can find a therapist. Like people do like occasionally thank me for giving them a fact, a piece of knowledge, but it's way more often that people say they were so grateful to feel like they weren't alone. And I think that's a magical part of peer support. It's so nice to go to our support group and be able to say, oh yeah, that time that I attempted suicide and was hospitalized for a week afterwards. The fact that I can just kind of like say that and everyone sitting around the table can nod and roll with it feels incredible. And like not everyone has the exact same feeling. People have had different experiences, but I think that there is a very shared connection that comes from what you are either explicitly or the opposite of explicitly, whatever the phrase is, saying when you go to peer support is like, I've struggled and I am trying to figure out my recovery in some kind of way. Like that's kind of the underlying current that I always feel. And it's so nice to have that camaraderie and security to share in that context implicitly. Thank you, John Drips. And I get, like that's great when it's stated as peer support. And it's also something, again, like we're talking about this as it's a job or an organization that does peer support, but this phenomenon happens all the time. And so I'm curious to hear from anyone here, like does the concept of peer support come up in your work? The folks who are the ZAC staff, and I can tell you're ZAC staff because your name is ZAC staff. Like does this concept of peer support come up in your day-to-day work? Sharon or Molly or Crystal or Laura or Michelle or Michael, or anyone, like does this concept come up even if it's not stated, like I am a peer support specialist?
Can you hear me, Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that it is like comes up in my work all the time. I'm not explicitly, that's not my job title, but I do what I do. I'm a clinical social worker and a drug and alcohol counselor because of my personal experience as a loved one and as one struggling with those issues myself. So it was nice to hear John make mention that, even if we don't, I work for Search at the Front Street Clinic. So it's nice to hear that it's being recognized as a more common thing. Because I certainly didn't get into this work because of being different or having something coveted. It's because I have something that I believe is in line with. And I know that my patients, it's also, I'm careful how I use my own story with my patients. So it's not necessarily something I'm like advertising day one. But it is often something that patients appreciate sharing and knowing that I have that as well. So
Thanks, Thornton. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have like peer support here at the school I work at through Zach Gordon, just with like our alliance, which is like the Gay Straight Alliance, but just having all those kids together in like safe space, it's almost like autonomous, the peer support, which is pretty great. Just have them all like be together and talk with each other and stuff. And sometimes they're goofy and other times they're a little bit more serious. So just something as casual as having a club where kids can hang out in a safe space, I think is an example of peer support.
Absolutely. Like it just some of the barriers or defenses can go down when that sense of peerness, sense of community is readily apparent, and you can engage with each other and in the world in a different way than when you don't have that familiarity.
I remember one of the teachers came into Alliance when it was like one of my first weeks. And the kids can be crazy. They can be just like bouncing off the walls. And this teacher was like, it's so cool to see these kids like express themselves, because she's like, most of these kids during school, they're all like super quiet and reserved. And I was like, these kids are reserved. So to like, that made me realize how big of an impact it really has, like after that teacher's comment.
Yeah, and I think the good feelings endure after that kind of interaction. You know, like I don't think I ever drive home feeling more at ease with the world than after our support group. And it's, you know, I'm talking about difficult stuff and I'm hearing other people talk about difficult stuff, but having my defenses down and like having shared and connected with people in that genuine way feels incredible and is worth the emotional currency that you spend while you're there, for me, in my opinion.
While also not an explicit peer support specialist, but as an implicit peer support specialist, I work as a substitute teacher. I'm going to school, but I work part-time as a substitute teacher in the schools. And occasionally I will get assigned to work with students who have emotional disturbance. And you know, sometimes these students will be described by other professionals as difficult, you know, or that they have behavioral problems or defiant, or, you know, whatever it is. And while I'm certainly not interested in, you know, being friends with a student, I think there's a way you can approach an interaction with a student who is going through deeply difficult things personally, most of which as a staff member, and particularly as a substitute teacher, that I'm not really informed about, and that's usually for the best. At the same time, there's a way that you can approach an interaction that brings in the peer support lens. And so one thing I do with students sometimes who are having big feelings, as teachers like to say, is helping them to be mindful of their own mental and emotional state, and then also helping them or empowering them to better regulate their emotional state. And that's something that I find really satisfying when I, you know, work with a student. And you know, I mostly in elementary, and a lot of the schools have like the hand brain model. I don't know how familiar you guys are with this, but yeah, anyways, it's like if a kid's wild, you know, going bonkers, they're up here. This is the cliff notes. And if they're fully regulated, they're down here. And so like just teaching kids like how they can be aware. Like I ask kids like, hey, where are you on this scale? Like, how are you doing right now? And getting them to check in about their own state. And it's not coming from a it's not coming from a power dynamic of you need to behave, you need to focus on your assignment, but it's coming from I can tell that you're struggling, and how can you better regulate your emotions, or what's going on with you right now, or why did you say that? So the peer support lens is something that I bring into my work as a substitute teacher.
And Laura spoke to, I think, one of the main considerations of the idea of being a peer supporter, regardless of the setting. And that's when it makes sense to use your own story to help somebody else. And like the way I always kind of conceptualize it is, like let's say Kara comes to me, Kara's struggling and asking me for help. Am I sharing my story because it's easier for me to talk about myself and I'm uncomfortable with what Kara is saying? Or am I using my story solely to benefit Kara and like maybe just sharing little bits and pieces just to illustrate a point or to show that I relate or to show that I can hang with the conversation? And so I'd like to hear from you, John and Kara, and then everyone else also. Like, I love having you all chime in. This is awesome. Just like, when does it make sense to share your story? When does it make sense not to? What are the I guess ethical or smart considerations, best practices of doing so?
I think for myself as an advocate at Aware, being a survivor and in long-term recovery, sharing my story, it builds that trust with people. There's also that unspoken known, like when you're working with somebody, you don't even need to share your story because they already know. Because we feel I try and explain this to other advocates that, don't have life experience and they don't understand how these relationships are built between myself and people that we work with. And it's just really hard to even put a definition to it or break it down to somebody if you haven't lived it. We on the daily, I'm navigating this with people that are in shelter or just coming to us for help. I think it plays a huge role in my job, and it builds that trust. I don't want anything from you. I'm gonna love you unconditionally. We're gonna figure this out. If this didn't work, let's find another solution. I like to refer to myself as like a hope giver. I really hold that near and dear to my heart. That's my core, because I know what it feels like when you're getting met with these barriers. You just feel hopeless. Nothing's going to work. You're going to be stuck here forever. And if I can show somebody that there is hope and I was able to do it, and I'm going to do it with you, beside you, underneath you, for me, that's everything in my work. And that's where my passion's at. And being somebody that's navigated Juneau's lovely system myself, I'm able to be like, okay, we're not going to go this route, we're going to go this route type of thing. It's just a different mindset when you're somebody that has lived it. And it really plays the most important role in my job. I look at people who work in this industry and people that come into it without life experience, and I see the struggles and that connection they try to have, and it is a bummer. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. Like, no, I don't want anybody to ever go through what I've gone through. But yeah, it's unexplained level of connection.
That was really well said, Michelle. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share.
Who else can share, like when sharing your story makes sense, when it doesn't? Being chief hope giver, you said something along those lines and I really liked it. What else do you all think about that?
Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. I think too, going along what you were saying, the burnout is so much quicker too, because I think because we've gone through certain things, we can hold a lot because we understand the dynamics and layers sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I've had so many helpers along the way that didn't have lived experience, but they had that compassion and that love that I needed in that moment. Sharing my story, I've learned many things over the years. You know, in the beginning, it was just like bam, 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 sharing. It was just all the things. And just over time, you know, I've just, depending on the audience and depending on who I'm talking to, like you were using the example of someone coming to you with a struggle, I keep it very 30,000 feet and then dive in as we're having the discussion, you know, just the general, like, I'm in recovery. I did in and out of prison 20 years, just like I just gave you guys, right? There's so much in there. I'm also a survivor of so many things, including many domestic violence and suicide attempts. You know, I mean, just there's so many things to dive into. Houselessness, you know, that the lifestyle that I lived, I went through. And so I keep it super broad and then allow, as they're feeling more comfortable and sharing, just kind of discerning, you know, how far I'm going to go into that. Now, when I'm speaking in public or in another setting, that's another story. I also keep it very broad depending on the subject or the audience. I've also learned over the years, like, I don't have to share my story every time I'm asked. I don't have to answer every phone call. I don't have to go to every TV station, newspaper, panel, conference, you name it. And it's not that I didn't know that before. There are people that exploit stories for certain things. And so it's just really important to understand that. And it's something that I'm very aware of now. Like I mean, I think when I got out, I mean, it wasn't a thing. Nobody talked about recovery out loud. Nobody talked about being incarcerated out loud. Nobody talked about mental health the way we do today. You know, we still have a long ways to go, but even in our own circles, we didn't. There was so much stigma, and there still is in our own circles. And so just, you know, finding the right size for the right situation when we're teaching folks how to be in that role of a peer support professional, recovery coach, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different navigator, you know, all the names. Those are the important pieces to really build that foundation of someone who is going into that as a role. And I think it just takes time too. You learn, you grow, you make mistakes, you trauma slime people. I've done that many times, you know. So I think it depends, but for me now, I'm very like intentional about keeping it super broad and then gauging the either individual or the audience or wherever I'm at, or if it is a media thing, or, you know, making sure too that the right language is used. And there's so many, I mean, I'm again a freak about this stuff, so people always hate to talk around me because I'm always correcting their language and I get very passionate about it. But as far as sharing, it's important to remember that I might trigger someone, as well as bring them in to, you know, open them up. Because I can't tell you how many times I've spoken in every kind of arena you can imagine, from 10 people to 1,000 people. And every single time I have folks come up after, and because I shared something, they're like, hey, me too, you know, or this is my story. But also you want to just make sure that, you know, you are aware that some people are not ready to do that. They're not ready to dive into those deep, dark spots. And so I'm sure you know this a lot, Michelle, working at Aware. I used to do a lot of work there with folks, you know, and bless all of you that work there.
Thank you.
Seriously, I've done a lot of work in my life, but that's like the real deal there. And yeah, so just gauge audience and be aware that you could be harming as much as you're helping.
I definitely agree with you there, Kara. I mean, there's a huge shift when it comes from the 2:30 in the morning, crisis call, patient being sent over from Bartlett versus somebody coming in on their own at 2:30 in the afternoon. It definitely, every situation is different and unique and fragile. And that's when you definitely have to put your skills to work on when is it the appropriate time, for sure.
That's the thing for me a lot of times, like when I share that and where I come in at that point is by thinking about, like, is this going to help support the connection that I'm building or the rapport that I'm maintaining with this person? So somebody comes in, a parent comes into my office, do a lot of parenting support, right? And they say to me, my kid got so dysregulated. Well, they don't use those words, but so mad, and they were throwing shit at me and all this kind of stuff, right? And I'll say to them, because I have lived experience, I've been there, I've had my kids do that, I know what that's like. And I'll say to them, just like, oh, did you get dysregulated? Like, did you get scared? Did your kids scare you? Because I know when my kids have done that, it scares me.
Yeah.
And I'm not sharing exactly what my kids did. I'm not sharing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just putting in a little piece there that helps them know, like, hey, I've been there. I've lived that. I've had my kids screaming and yelling and throwing stuff at me and getting violent. And like, what do I do with that? How do I, and just that little connection of like, oh, I know when that happened with me, I got really scared. It gives them some words too to figure out, like, how do I connect? Where do I put those feelings? What is actually going on? And it furthers that connection and that rapport and that relationship. And that to me is like where I'm gauging, when do I share and when do I not? Can I be mindful in my sharing about, is this going to, intensify that rapport or that connection? Or is it going to, like Kara said, because I do that too sometimes, right? Like, oh crap, that wasn't the right thing. I got to pull back right there. I'm just triggering them. That was a little bit too much. But it's really kind of just trying to gauge, when is this going to be useful to know and to hear and to feel? And when is it not? I'm not going to interrupt them in the middle of their trauma dump to then explain what's going on with me. That doesn't make any sense. But once they stop talking and they're kind of shaking and I can see that fear from their kids getting so violent at home, that's when I can say, are you feeling scared right now? Because I get really scared and I don't know what to do with that when I'm around my kids and I'm freaking out because of their big behaviors, right? How do I then step into that space? And that gives them some words and terminology and allows for them to build into that connection and that rapport and feel that support. Like Aaron was saying, it's all about, like, I can tell parents a million times, like, do this thing, do that thing. They don't care. Like, sure, it's useful, I can use it, I can do it, but what really is helpful for parents in recovery that I'm working with as a parent in recovery is like, how do we do this? How do we make this work? How do I not be the violent, aggressive, abusive butthole that I used to be? How do I choose to be a nurturing parent and do that kind of thing? And that's when I share those kinds of things.
Jess, I think that's awesome. Like, I'm picturing how great it is for the people who come into your office, just hear you say like that one sentence, knowing that you get it. I'm picturing myself walking into that scenario. And like, I wouldn't even realize that relating to somebody is on the table, on the menu, I wouldn't even realize that's an option. And then to hear you say that would be so good. Like, oh, this person gets it. I'm not overreacting, because I'm sure there's some folks who think that they're overreacting or like doing it wrong in some kind of way. And so it's just, I'm sure that's so many people at ease right off the bat. That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tressa. That's something that I did learn myself from Tressa, because she was our children's advocate when I first started here 4.5 years ago. And there's a lot of outburst within shelter, all kinds of behavior, everything from having people come in that are victims to substance abuse, to families with kids, and there's a lot of escalation. And the thing that Tressa taught me was what's the feeling behind the action and the behavior. So when things are happening in shelter and there's moms having, meltdowns and kids are having meltdowns and adults having meltdowns, when I approach those situations, I don't leave it right at the action. I want to find out what that feeling is behind the action and to validate that, because a lot of the times the people that we work with are not at a point where they know how to communicate how they're feeling. So they're acting out, and for them to be able to feel heard and know that someone wants to get to the core of the behavior and the feeling of why that action happened, I get that more of a connection and able to navigate those situations and de-escalate them a lot faster versus you can't be screaming, this is not okay. Like we're not going to go anywhere with that. You need to go deeper. And that was something that Tressa I took from working with her, and I really appreciated it.
So sweet, Michelle. Thank you. I love working with you too.
Yes, Meryl, we miss you too.
Sorry, I'm trying to mute myself there. Struggling, but now I'm back. So I think I'd like to get into another question here, but I think before I do that, I've neglected to mention that we scheduled this until 1:30. We'll see if we go all the way till 1:30. Maybe we'll end early. We'll see how long conversation goes. But just want to let everyone know that because I think our last 4 or 5 have been an hour long. This one's scheduled to be an hour and a half long. If you need to drop off, that's great. Go live your life. You don't really need my permission to do that. But for those of you who are going to stick around till 1:30, that's lovely too. So next question is, what do you all think people don't know about peer support that you wish they knew? And I'd like to hear from maybe John first. And I've got a bunch of thoughts for this one, but I'm going to try to sit on my hands for a second. But what do you wish people knew about peer support that you don't think is always commonly spoken about or referenced or understood?
I think that peer support has a long history in the United States. And I think that despite there's kind of despite its long history, I think that it's a totally underutilized method. And I think I don't think it's permeated into the broader culture. So like people know, like you've seen on TV, people talk about being on meds, going off their meds. We're familiar with the idea of people using medication as a means to regulate what's happening in their mind. You've heard people on TV, and that's like, at least in my age bracket, I know for different people it's different, but in my age bracket, TV is kind of like how culture is sort of like programmed into us. But like people talk about seeing a shrink when there's an issue, right? People talk about seeing a social worker or a counselor. Have you ever seen like on TV, like people talk about seeing a peer support specialist? It's not as commonly known. And, like some organizations, they may offer it, but not advertise it very well. Some organizations, a lot of places see a peer support specialist as something, and it varies state to state, but some states see peer support specialists as something specific to substance use. So that's one thing, but I think it doesn't seem like it's fully caught on in the broader culture. And so I think the most important thing is getting the information out for people to, like, even if a client knew or thought that they wanted peer support, they wouldn't know that it's offered. Even if they were certain that they wanted a peer support specialist, like mentally, they wouldn't necessarily know where to ask for it or who to seek it from. And so I think that it's really important that more people know about the existence of peer support specialists. And I think that it's really important that people know, that organizations know how powerful peer support is. You know, on an example, pulling an example out of my head, JuneauMentalHealth.org, right? That webpage, you see there's mental health organizations, there's peer support groups, and that's great. It's great that we're referring people to support groups. But what about people who are intimidated by a group? What about people who would like to see somebody one-on-one? How can we get more people to know about the existence of peer support specialists, that is, potential clients? How can we get more organizations to see the power of peer support so that they're more likely to get more people engaged in it? And then, yeah, how to connect those two. I think that's the important part.
I think that's really well said. Like, just even it becoming common enough that people know to ask for it. How could an organization like JAMI know that people want it? And just using them as an example, if people going there don't even know that's something they could potentially want, how would JAMI even know that there's demand if it's not something that's spoken about in common everyday life enough for the people going there to know that that's something they could request? It's a tricky thing to get something popular enough to get it over that lump. Kara, what about you? What do you wish people knew about the world of peer support?
Well, I think John hit on a lot of the really important things, you know. I think to add on to that would be, one, there's not a set way of how people do peer support. It's really tricky because, like, when I started, we didn't have paid positions, we didn't have these roles, but we also didn't get paid to pay our bills. So it was like doing our jobs full time and then trying to, before and after work, you know, hit it hard to help folks. And so we've, in the state of Alaska and across the country, you know, we've tried to find a way to have that peer support specialist certification for Alaska. And that's a real fine line to walk to. We don't want to professionalize the role, because the whole idea of peer support is that authenticity, but we also want people to be able to pay their bills. And we need folks to do this work, you know. And so it's been quite a journey, just again, being in Alaska, kind of in the beginning. I remember, I mean, mental health, like RAP, that's been around for a really long time. That was probably the first exposure I had to peer support and training. And then we brought up the first ever recovery coach training back in like 2014, I want to say. I got to be a part of that, and then just trying to integrate together and really, it's known, right? Like, I'm in arenas all the time, and it's crazy to me that we still have so many people in this state and in organizations who are in behavioral health who don't know the impacts of peer support. My team's actually doing a panel on peer support here in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and we're in this whole place of Alaska professionals, you know, in behavioral health, and there's so many questions and not understanding. I guess for me too, is the value, right? So one of the things I'm always advocating for is the value of that peer role. everything from salary, pay scale. When people are sharing their story, they should always get a per diem. When you're in these big conferences and being asked to do that. And I always coach people on that too, because like you're expressing your most innermost vulnerable self. And somewhere along the line, you know, it's just like any speaker that they're bringing in. So the value, you know, also as a professional, and this is where like peer support for me has changed so much over the years, you know, depending on where I'm at in life. I have a lot of other professional friends who are also, you know, formerly incarcerated, you know, in recovery, SUD, mental health. And so it's important for me to have those friends because I still get the same value. I still get the same peer support. It's just in a different way today. You know, it's really difficult to sit in these rooms with people who look at you as certain, I mean, it never ends, you know, and so it's great to be on different things and people are always like, you're so amazing, da, 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 da. But also I'm someone in recovery after 20 years of active addiction. I still am in, you know, working my journey through mental health issues. I'm still a survivor. I'm a mom of a daughter who spent 10 years in active addiction and I didn't know if she was going to live or die every single day. Today, she celebrates 11 months clean and sober. So, you know, there's so many aspects to it. And I think people just still don't know, they don't value, you know, that experience. They don't value the fact of what we went through to be here and that we have made a choice to like really share that freedom and our wisdom really. And I mean, you can't, like I said, I mean, that's just something you can't put a price on. So I love working where I'm at. Obviously, I'm a chief operating officer, like a COO. That's insane. People, when I'm in places, I just was up in Fairbanks at our new facilities we have up there, and they're like, oh, the big wigs are here, you know, which cracks me up. And then I come in and I'll just be like, so guess how I became the COO? You know, you know, was tired of seeing his friends die. Alaska didn't have a means to pay for peer support and the whole story of how it happened. And because of my lived experience gives me that expertise. And of course, I've gotten some education along the way and whatnot, but it's just, for me, it's the value. So in my eyes, we started as a grassroots live Facebook page. Hey, we got well, you can too. That's literally how we started in 2014, 15. And of course, we just got hundreds of people messaging, calling, parents, loved ones. I mean, you name it. People are calling like, how do I get my son, daughter, friend, mom, dad, help? And that brought us to peer support, Level 15 waiver stuff we don't need to talk about here, but we were able to then really bring clinical services, integrate into our peer support. And usually it's the other way around, right? You have clinical services attaching peer support. And so for me, I love to always just share that there's not a hierarchy of services. Like we need all of us, you know, all of us are going to get our client, person, brother, sister, loved one, you know, to where they're going to have better quality of life. And really, to me, that's the success. It's not abstinence, it's not this, it's not that. I mean, it's better quality of life. So that's a long-winded to say we need to value peer support way more than we do. And that's from the top all the way on the ground, even with our own peers, to understand that, again, it's not just a role. We need to have people with lived experience on all levels in every arena, in especially behavioral health, criminal justice, you know, yeah, should be a specialty. I'm not like just some awesome redemption story, you know, and so that's something that also like grinds my gears. Although I get it, we need to do those things, but also like we're helping moving mountains. We're literally changing, it's that paradigm shift, you know, of just treating people with dignity and respect.
Kara, that was a heck of a speech. And you mentioned that some of your coworkers are about to present. So if you
Yes.
need to run to go see them, then that's a
I
great
do.
way to end your time with us.
Okay, you guys are amazing. I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
And I've got some things that I wish more folks knew about peer support, and feel free to chime in. I've really appreciated the conversation we're having here. But I think the first thing that I had to learn was that my lived experience has value, which is the exact opposite of what I'd learned up to that point. I was always ashamed of my experience with my own mental health, and the fact that I had mental illness and that I've been hospitalized. Like, it took me like, who knows how long to like tell people that I was in a mental hospital. Like, it happened like over a holiday break. So like, folks weren't necessarily expecting to see me. So like a lot of people didn't realize I was gone for a while. And like, it was a source of shame. There's no way I would have like brought it up in a workplace, right? Like that concept was out of the question to me for a long time. And so like, that's something I needed to learn. It's something I desperately want other people to learn, is that just their lived experience has value in and of itself, that you have worth as a person in general. I think most people can hang with that, but that your lived experience has worth specifically. I think it's a tougher little nugget to share with folks and to have it really be adopted. I think that peer support happens in all kinds of settings. We've spoken to that in a couple different ways. And it's one that I really just think is worth mentioning one more time. Like, Michelle's job title is not peer support specialist. Laura's job title is not peer support specialist. Tressa's is not peer support specialist, but like that, playing the role of the peer in in one sentence or in half an hour or 4 days a week, whatever it is all valuable. And I think it's like breaking down unnecessary barriers in our lives in general, and promotes connection, and connection is life-saving. So that's something I really enjoy stressing and bringing up. Something specific is the idea of when your lived experience is enough. So we had peer support specialist training last week. It's a classroom type thing, 40 hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we had 11 people in there. And multiple people said, like, I just don't know if I've had enough recovery to be a peer support specialist. I don't know if I'm good enough in my recovery, strong enough in my recovery. John Drips is very correct. It was actually 37 and a half hours. Thank you for that. But like, of course, like, anyone's recovery is valuable and has worth. It all looks different, right? It's like we've had different experiences in our recovery, but like, it all has worth. And I think that this concept of like a magic amount of recovery that you have, and therefore you're good to go, is wrong. And I think most folks understand that recovery is like a lifelong thing, that it's a process, that it's a muscle to work out. And I wish that there was more strength in that conviction that our recovery is meaningful and valuable.
That's something I hold a lot of weight on, and especially when it comes to people that are currently struggling with, navigating that beginning of getting sober and the relapses. And, there's this stigma that a relapse is horrible. And I'm like, no, it's like, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but it's a part of it. It's not bad. This, you have to take that relapse, learn from it, and, associate everything that happened within that moment. And then you get to use that to continue in your recovery. And what I call it is, it's that journey. And the one phrase I always use is, recovery is the one school that you never graduate from. I will forever be going to school when it comes to recovery. I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to know everything. I'm learning something every day about myself and my addiction and just life in general. So I really put a lot of value when we have these discussions when people are struggling or going through recovery is that don't think it's going to end tomorrow. You're always going to be going to school, and really hold value to that and take that and, soak up as much information in life that you can throughout the journey. And people really will hold on to that statement. And so it's something that I had picked up years ago in an AA meeting down in Yakima, Washington. And I love sharing that with people, because then I overhear people that I work with share that with somebody else. And it's a good feeling. It really is.
It's really well said. And it's a school you never graduate from. And whatever you've learned at whatever point in that schooling you're in is valuable to share with others. Like hearing how it's hard is valuable, and hearing how you feel like you're new to the idea of recovery is valuable for other people to hear. And hearing like you've been in recovery for 40 years and it's still hard is valuable for folks to hear. Like it's helpful to hear from folks along every step of that process in both formal and informal settings, implicit and explicit settings. Another one that I wanted to mention that I wish people knew is that having a criminal background is not, even though they're called barrier crimes, the state of Alaska has a list of things that are called barrier crimes that they don't preclude you from being in the workplace. So there's something called a variance that can turn whatever your criminal record is into something that no longer precludes you from working in a quote unquote helping profession. And that's something that again came up last week in our class and comes up regularly in conversations that I have with folks, where people say, but I have this barrier crime, so I'll never get hired, not eligible to work anywhere. And that's kind of true, but you can get a variance. There's a form, and we're going to do a workshop in a couple of weeks, a variance workshop to help folks get those variances. I personally don't know enough about them other than that they exist, that there's a form you fill out. But we have someone from Guest No Human Services who's going to join us to put on a workshop, and then also I'll learn so I can help folks out after that workshop. So for anyone who doesn't make it to the workshop, you get some one-on-one support getting a variance. And I guess that's a misconception that I hear from folks, that my criminal record means that I'm never going to be able to work in a place where peer support would even be an option. So not true. You just need help getting a variance. Another one, again, feel free to chime in on all these, is I wish that employers recognize the stigma that they bring to the role in the hiring process. I'll give you one example of this. This is something I've heard a few times from a few places, is organizations that would like to hire a peer support specialist, but they need the right person. They need a solid person. And it's a sentence that they would never say about a therapist. They would never say like, oh, we'd like to have a therapist, but only if it's the right person. Like it would be like, obviously, of course, we only want to hire a therapist that's a good fit. And they would never say that about the person working at the front desk. I think we'd like to have a front desk person, but only if it's the right person, right? Like it's the decision is always made that like this role is an important role until it comes to the idea of peer support. And then there's this, a nice word for it, a stigma. There's a lot of other like less friendly words that you could put to it that prevents people from having that same mindset, from treating it like any other role as an organization. And I don't really know how to get over this issue of employers not recognizing their shittiness in the conceptualization of the role of a peer support specialist. I think it's something that the Christina Loves and Karen Nelsons of the world are excellent at, giving you a nice speech that makes you re-examine yourself. But it's something I hear regularly, that yeah, we'd like to have a peer support specialist, but we need the right person. And I urge you all to help me figure out my best language to push back on that. And also, if you hear it in your day-to-day lives, to remind folks that they probably don't use that same language when they're talking about any single other position in the workplace. So why in the hell are you using it about peers?
I think what comes to mind for me is the idea that, not every person can or wants to be a peer support specialist. Not everybody who's going through substance use recovery or mental health recovery is going to want to become a peer support specialist. Like you said, not every person is going to be a good fit. However, that doesn't mean that an organization can't bring up the idea with every client. Like, hey, you seem to be at a stable point in your recovery. I wanted to let you know that for people in a stable point in their recovery, there's this thing called peer support specialist, and it can help you along in your journey. It's a way that you can give back and share about your experience that you've had. You've had so much growth getting to this point, and you can share that experience in a way that other people can't. Organizations can reach out to every one of their clients and say, this is something that we're interested in. There's a model associated with employment where employers like have jobs. Like there's something that they like guard, and they like dole them out based on somebody who like makes it through the hiring process. But I think there's so many ways that peer support is transforming the way that organizations think about things. And if organizations are serious about finding that person who is the right fit, then they're going to reach out to the people who are most likely to be peer support specialists, the people in recovery that they serve at their organizations that are coming through the door all the time. Those are the people that they need as peer support specialists, and they have the best access to them. So for an organization that's looking to hire a peer support specialist, literally all they got to do is ask their clients.
Well said, John. Appreciate it. Oh, go ahead, Tresson.
I agree, John, that's so important. And it's something that I do, like nurturing parenting, and I do a lot of parenting classes and supports around that. And I'm hoping to expand that greatly because I think it's really needed in Juneau. And in working on that, I've been talking to my supervisor about how I want to hire a peer support specialist to help with that group, a parent who has gone through the group, who knows what they're talking about, who has done this. I have a parent in mind, right, that I know would be great with this. They worked at JYS. I said, you should come join my group. And they're like, I don't need that. I know all this stuff. I know all that. It's like, but that's why you should come join this, because I need your voice in that group. I need that peer support voice of saying, hey, I know this stuff too. And it's so freaking hard to intellectually know that, but then put it into practice when I'm stressed out and I've been working all day and I can't get it together and my kid is screaming and throwing this huge temper tantrum, and how am I going to handle that right there in the moment? And he agreed to join me for group, and he was just telling me today, we're wrapping up, we have 2 groups left, and he was saying, oh my gosh, I know when you initially suggested this group, I was like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like, but can I like do this more? When you do the next round, can I do it again too? Because like it was so fun to share stuff and have the other dads be like, oh, and then come back the next week and be like, dude, or text me during the week. Like, I just did the thing that you said and it worked wonders and it felt so good. And I was like, yes, see, this is why we need those people.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tressa. I think the last thing that I wanted to share with you all are just some resources that exist for people working in the peer support field or that wanted more information about the peer support field. I think that it's like we've said, like it's still a new concept for a lot of folks. And when you're trying to get acquainted with a new concept, something that I always try to do is just like subscribe to some newsletters or follow some Facebook pages or whatever it is, just get immersed in the concept. Like, even if you're just looking at the titles of the webinars, you're like, you start understanding like, all right, these are the conversations that are happening in this world. This is the type of information that's being shared. These are the topics that are being discussed. And there's two great resources that I know for that. If you all have other resources related to peer support, share them, please. But the first is the Copeland Center, and named after someone who's considered one of the leaders of the peer movement. I can't remember their name, but their last name was Copeland. And they do regular webinars. They have a newsletter, and in general have some good information. Again, it's a great place to get acquainted with the conversations that are happening around peer support. And the other one is a group called Doors to Wellbeing. So I've shared both their URLs here. You all feel free to go forth and look at those if you'd like. I subscribe to the newsletters and watch some of the webinars to help develop my thinking about the field. Like we mentioned earlier, there's a state certification, and here's the link to the website for that. The state certification is a mix of classroom time, 37.5 hours, 12 hours of self-directed videos, and getting like a letter support and some other information that most of which you know off the top of your head, but maybe some of it you need to look up, things like your criminal background. And so you put all that information together, spend $180, send it off to the state, and then you get certified as a peer support specialist. Some folks like to do that just because it's nice to be certified in something, and some folks do it to become eligible for specific peer support specialist jobs. Either way, if you're interested in getting that certification, we're happy to help. Happy to help you through the application process. We do the class once a year. We're hoping to do it maybe twice next year. We'll see. And there's other folks who do that class online also regularly. Like sometimes they'll meet like every Monday evening for however many Monday evenings you need to get those 37.5 hours. Sometimes they'll do it every Saturday and Sunday, full day. So they've got like all these different funky times. It's free. It's online, virtual, out of Anchorage. So there's different ways to get certified. And I'm happy to help you all. I'm also happy to help with $180 if that's getting in the way of anyone getting certified as a peer support specialist. This is something that our organization feels strongly about, and we want to promote it in any way possible. And then the last link I wanted to share is more information about the variances. So here's the link and then a little blurb about it. And like we said, we'll do a workshop in next some amount of time with Charlene from Juneau Human Services. So you can either follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletter, which is at namijuneau.org. And so I guess I'll leave you with that plug also. There's our website. If you're not on our mailing list and you'd like to find out about our upcoming stuff, that's a great way to do so. That's everything that I wanted to share. Do you have questions, last comments, messages? Words of wisdom, maybe from John Trips. That's always appreciated, I think, by everyone.
Yeah, I love being given the opportunity to talk. That's one of the things that's so great about being a peer support specialist. But yeah, I think mostly I'm just excited to be part of a growing transformation in the mental health field that is challenging the disease model of substance use disorder, challenging the medical establishment to consider its role in people's mental health challenges, and how we as a community, a global community, can better reach people and provide an environment that's conducive to recovery. So it's a very it's an exciting time to be involved, and I'm so glad that each of you came here to learn more about it and hopefully to become involved yourselves.
Well said, thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
I just think that was awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Happy to have you here.
Yeah,
At,
I was gonna say this same thing. Oh, sorry, Tressa. I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say
Michelle.
this is great. Usually you get on these type of webinar Zoom trainings and there's 20 plus people and you don't get that, you know, it was just nice to be able to have a small group. We all got to, you know, share experiences, but we're all working in the same area. I know we all connect together, and just to be able to share information and touch on things and where we're at within our organizations, to me was priceless, and I really appreciated it.
Well, great to have you here. Glad it worked for you.
I agree. Also, on a totally separate thing, the variance workshop, is there a way to like join for that, or are you guys offering that to other people or companies?
Oh yeah, I mean the idea, and I haven't talked to we haven't talked about the specifics yet, but I think the hope would be that, like, yeah, like if 500 people want to come, let's do it for 500 people. And maybe that means we do it virtually, but I guess the point what I'm really trying to make here is that we want to open up to whoever wants to go to it.
Okay,
And
cool.
we'll figure out the logistics and whatnot.
Well, please put me down on the list of somebody who really wants to go to that.
Outstanding.
Ditto. I'm like ditto.
Really gonna be there to support that one and try to do
Mhm.
that.
That's awesome.
Yep, same here.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all. Great to have you here. Appreciate the
Yes.
time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Aaron,
Enjoy
and
the sun.
everyone.